All right, man, peace. So I'm here going through my DVR, and I have a lot of old episodes of the morning news here where I'm finding a lot of great segments. One of the very, very well done segments as far as content is concerned is on Benjamin Franklin. And I've meant to do a video on Benjamin Franklin for a while now because he said a lot of very provocative things that really need to have a video made about certain things that he stated. So I'm going to just comment on certain statements that he's made in the past and just use this content as a backbone for it. Of course, I'm going to let them speak and I'm going to chime in accordingly.
And now a page from our Sunday Morning Almanac, June 11th, 1742, 275 years ago today. Hot times for one of our founding fathers. For that was the day Benjamin Franklin is widely believed to have invented the stove that bears his name. Franklin's cast iron creation was designed to fit inside a fireplace. To solve the problem of too much heat going up the chimney, Franklin hit upon an innovative way of using iron plates, as Susanna Carroll of Philadelphia's Franklin Institute explains.
Franklin came up with the idea of using a baffle system that allowed the heat to travel throughout the stove. The iron plates inside the baffles would heat up and retain the warmth of that fire, and then the heat would be released throughout the day.
No, Franklin didn't come up with the baffle system. But you can see Benjamin Franklin, they really love to exalt him. And I mean, it's kind of understandable. He is considered one of the quote-unquote founding fathers. He's the only non-president to have his face on a monetary note. And, there's various reasons for that. He's probably the chief Mason in American history. But no, he didn't invent the bifold. As a matter of fact, his stove barely worked. It was used more as a radiator than anything else. But like I said, he gets a lot of credit for a lot of shit that he really didn't do. But he's what you call like an autodidact, meaning a self-taught person. All right. And those are normally the most potent minds are people who are self-taught because you're not being guided by propaganda. All right. But he does get a lot of credit for shit that he didn't really invent. All right. He damn sure did not invent the bifold as that female historian was trying to allege. Like I said, most of the Franklin stove really didn't even work. They use it more as a radiator. But that stuff goes back to the ancient world. All right. Using, heat exchange and things of that nature. And even electricity, which he gets credit for studying. The ancients had knowledge of electricity. But, we'll get into that a little later.
He's credited with more inventions as well. Among many, this glass harmonica called an armonica. Parisian music man Jean-Claude Chapuis gave us a demonstration a few years back. Yet another side to our most multi-talented founding father.
Look, let me say this about Franklin. And I touched on this in regards to how he gets credited for his studies on electricity. There's something that you brothers could look up. It's called the Parthian, or the Baghdad Battery, I should say. The Baghdad Battery. It's a battery that they found in Iraq. At one point in Iraq's history, in the ancient world, of course, it was known as Sumer, or Shinar, I should say. Conventionally known as Sumer. And then it became known as Babylon. And during around the time of Christ, it was known as Parthia, or the Parthian Empire. And the Parthian Empire was governed by so-called blacks who happened to live in that region during the time. And, they don't talk about the Parthian Empire much. People don't know about it. And that's how you know that it was governed by blacks. But they were the main antagonists of the Roman Empire. All right. The Roman Empire, especially Imperial Rome, they had serious beef with the Parthian Empire, even all the way up into the 3rd century AD. And they wanted to conquer Parthia for the same reason that America wanted to conquer Iraq, for the oil. All right. for the petroleum. The Romans wanted to conquer Parthia for the petroleum, but Parthia was ruled by so-called black people. And around the time of Christ, they had something called the Baghdad Battery, which showed an understanding of electricity. All right, you guys could look it up. I haven't really looked into the Baghdad Battery for a long time, but if I remember correctly, it had like a copper filament and iron, like a cast ore, and it didn't really generate much electricity. But you guys could look that up. It's called the Baghdad Battery. All right, electricity is not anything new. Like, I remember they found a certain object in the ocean right off of the Aegean Islands. The Aegean Islands is like right off of what's known as Greece. All right, and the Ionian Sea, they found it like a gear shift. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called the Antithicara, something along those lines. But you brothers could look that up. Point being, Franklin didn't really invent most of the things that he gets credit for. But because he's a founding father and a master mason, they give him a lot of credit for certain things. Franklin joined the Masons in 1732. I think I covered this in the American Revolution video. He joined the Masons in like 1732. By 1734, he was already like the chief Mason in America. All right. And for those of you who don't know, all the Masons are Luciferians. All right. Franklin was what you call an Enlightenment thinker. The Enlightenment thinkers were basically illuminists, quote unquote illuminists or Luciferians, who were trying to remove all spiritual thought and replace it with what you call, quote unquote, rational thought. All right, and that's the fountain of certain things, certain theories and philosophies like evolution, the Big Bang. Is man's attempt to try to explain everything, even though he cannot. He was an Enlightenment thinker. What the so-called Masons do is, in the guise of religious belief, they try to sneak in the Enlightenment thought process to basically infect the mass populace of the world into believing that man basically invented himself. That's the point behind evolution, and that's why I always stay on evolution, and there's going to be more to come in regards to that topic. But like I said, Franklin, he became a master mason, or the chief of the American Masons, by 1734. And you have to understand how prominent this man was, because it's over 40 years later that you have the so-called American Revolution. And like I already stated, the reason why you had the American Revolution is because it's not because of the stamp tax or the tea tax and all that other bullshit. All it was because the Bank of England, which was run by the Rothschilds, they basically had King George III, in debt. And in order for England to come out of debt, he had to put the colonies deeper into debt. All right. The colonies had something called the Colonial Scrip. And then the Colonial Scrip, they didn't have any debt because basically they were generating, or they were printing money to match the amount of gold that they had. All inflation is when you print more money than you have gold or silver to back it. So what the Bank of England did, they got upset at the prosperity of the colonies. They made King George pass a provision that made the colonies have to agree to borrow money from the Bank of England on interest. Basically, the colonies had to agree to issue bonds to the Bank of England. A bond is just a promise to pay, right? So the colonies had to issue bonds to the Bank of England stating that after we borrow this money from you, we're going to pay you back the money that we borrowed from you on interest. That's how banks work. That's how they get you into debt. All right. So what the colonists did, under the so-called Masons, who are just Luciferians, they basically organized what we would call today a provocation or a psyop called the Boston Tea Party, where they basically got in blackface because the so-called Native Americans at that time, they were so-called black. All right. So they basically got in blackface and put on some feathers and staged this event where they threw tea into the sea. And this, of course, caused intervention by the British Army. King George, he basically had the British military. He basically had them take up arms and settle all around Massachusetts. and basically declare martial law. All right. And this roused up the American colonists, and it precipitated the American Revolution. Benjamin Franklin acted as the liaison between America and a lot of Britain's enemies. Being a master mason, he was welcomed into places like France. France has always been known for being led heavily or under heavy Masonic influence. Benjamin Franklin, he acted as the liaison between America and France. His main contact was a man named Vergun, if I remember correctly. And Vergun was a Jesuit. Like I already stated, the Jesuits are basically the CIA for the Vatican. Right? He was also a Mason. So Franklin, he organized a transaction where they were able to borrow a lot of money from France and France's support in the American Revolution. Eventually, America was able to, quote unquote, win that war. By the way, King George III of England, as well as his wife, Queen Charlotte, they were so-called black. All right? For those of you guys who don't know. Yeah, they were so-called black people. And like I said, they were able to borrow money from France. They were able to so-called win the war. And that's basically how you got America. It was all based off of pretense over them being forced to borrow money from the Bank of England. Everything is always about the money system, brothers. That's all it's about. And I've said that over and over and over again. In regards to Benjamin Franklin, he was also a pedophile, allegedly, as well as a serial killer, allegedly. They found the bones of many children and other people buried under his house that he had in London at address 36 Craven Street. All right, 36 Craven Street. Like I said, he was a master mason and a Luciferian, and they found many, many bones of children and adults under his house. They tried to claim that it was for a friend of his who was studying anatomy. All that is bullshit. Believe me, they already know what he was up to. All right, but that's neither here nor there. The main thing that I wanted to touch on, after giving some background on Ben Franklin, is a statement that he made. He wrote an essay called Observations on Mankind, something along those lines. It's called Observations on, was it Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind? Something along that line. He wrote an essay about it. Basically, very similar things to what Caucasians do, where they try to tabulate how the different races are going to multiply across the earth. But the point of me bringing this up is that when you read this essay, Observations on the Increase of Mankind, or the Population Increase of Mankind, something along those lines, he basically admitted and acknowledged that the people of Europe during that time were mostly considered people of color. All right. He basically said that the only people who were Caucasian in Europe were certain English and a specific type of people living in Germany. And everybody else was pretty much so-called black, or as he called them, tawny or swarthy. All right. And this included statements that he made about Swedish people, Russians, Italians. He called them tawny or swarthy. All right. Which are terms to mean people of color or brown-skinned people. All right. But you know what? Let's see how she's going to finish this out.
The folks at the Franklin Institute have sent along 2 more of Franklin's inventions. This original lightning rod and a replica of his bifocals. Incidentally, Franklin never patented any of his inventions.
Yeah, because he hardly invented shit.
He once said, as we benefit from the inventions of others, we should share our own freely and generously.
Yeah, while he was running around molesting children and killing them, all right, and sacrificing them to Baal or whoever he was sacrificing them to, allegedly, all right. But once again, you brothers could look that up. He had a house over there or domicile over there in London, address 36 Craven Street, where they found the remains of many children and adults under that home, which they try to explain away by saying that they belong to an anatomist friend of his, which is bullshit. But that's neither here nor there. Like I said, he made a statement. I'm probably going to include it at the end of this video. He made a statement on the observations of the population increase of mankind, where he talked about the various races of the world. And he acknowledged that most of the races, or most of the peoples in Europe, even up to the late 1700s, were predominantly considered people of color. All right. All right, so now this is going to be the continuation on the video that I was making pertaining to Benjamin Franklin, and the statement that I made in reference to the document that he wrote, Benjamin Franklin, called Observations on the Peoples of Mankind, or Observations on the Multiplying of Mankind, something along that line. You brothers can look it up. This article was written in reference to that document that Benjamin Franklin wrote in regard to the different races of mankind. And Benjamin Franklin is going to confirm a sentiment that I evoked in the video on Ben Franklin, that Benjamin Franklin already knows, or already knew, what I've been stating, that Europe was populated mostly by people of color, so-called black people, well into the mid-1700s. By the mid-1700s, the Caucasian was taking over, and what they were doing was they were kicking out, they were deporting the people of color that were still in Europe, and they were deporting them to America. All right, as I've stated in the past, so-called blacks in America are descendants of three groups: the Aboriginal blacks that were already here, the blacks that came here from Europe after they were kicked out of Europe, and the so-called blacks who were sent here from the west coast of Africa. All right. Those three groups have mixed in together, and utilizing the term black, the U.S. government has basically taken away most of the understanding amongst the various groups of people of color of where they come from and what their cultures are. And, you know, that's how they keep people confused, is by giving them that corporate racial title of black. So let's see what Benjamin Franklin has to say about this. Now, the title of this article is Swarthy Germans. We're going to get an understanding of what the word swarthy means. So now it says here, Louis Rumbaud adds some valuable perspective to the immigration debate by citing some of Ben Franklin's thoughts on the horrors of the U.S. being overrun by German immigrants. Let's see what Ben has to say. Why should the Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlements? And by the way, Palatine, that's a region in Germany. All right. Under the Holy Roman Empire, Holy Roman Empire was an empire that was ruled over by so-called blacks in the middle of Europe, stretching all the way from parts of Spain all the way through France, Belgium, Germany, and bordering on Poland and that area. All right, but it was ruled over by the so-called black Germans. But anyway, let's continue on. And by herding together, establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours. Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? Now you have to ask yourself, seeing as modern day Germans are viewed as Caucasians, and seeing as there's very little difference really no difference in how modern day Germans look as opposed to how the Caucasian English look, why would he make that statement about complexion unless the people of Germany at that time did not look like the people who are in Germany today? Right? When you think about Germany today, you really think about they're the most so-called white of any nation in Europe. If you look at the totem pole of what's considered authentically Caucasian or authentically white, you think of Germany, you think of the Caucasians in England, and you think of the Scandinavians. So why would Benjamin Franklin say that unless during that time period they were in the midst of a racial cleansing of Europe, in which you had a certain type of people who were being kicked out and deported. Let's see what else he has to say. It says, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionably very small. All Africa is black or tawny. So we're going to get an understanding of what he's saying when he says black or tawny. Basically, what he's saying when he says black, he's talking about like a Wesley Snipes. When he says tawny, he's talking about anywhere from a slightly darker brown to a slightly light brown. All right. Think of anywhere from a Kobe Bryant complexion to a Steph Curry complexion. All right. That's what he means when he says all of Africa is black or tawny. Black meaning like a Wesley Snipes, and tawny meaning anywhere from a Kobe Bryant up to a Steph Curry. So let's continue on. Asia, chiefly tawny. When he's talking about Asia, he means mostly the so-called Middle East. All right. The Middle East extending into maybe parts of Southeast Asia. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. So he says America was wholly tawny, meaning different shades of brown before the newcomers, meaning the Caucasian immigrants from England, got there. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion. Now, all these people today you think of as Caucasian. French, Russian, Swedes, right? You think of them as Caucasians, right? So why would he call them swarthy? We're going to get an understanding of what the term swarthy means also. As are the Germans also. So he called the Germans swarthy. The Saxons only accepted, meaning the Saxons were considered a group within Germany. They're the Caucasians who claimed the term Saxon. The original Saxons were black as well. But you had a group in Germany who claimed that term Saxon. And they're the ancestors of the people in Germany today, the Caucasian Germans today. All right. The people in England and the people in Germany today are kinfolk, right? The Caucasians in England and Germany today are kinfolk. That's why they'll even tell you that the ruling family under Queen Victoria, what they call the Saxe-Coburg line, they came from Germany. All right. It says, who with the English make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I could wish their numbers were increased. And while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods, and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of inhabitants in Mars or Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? So that proves to you right there that when he was talking about people being tawny and swarthy, he's talking about actual complexion. He's talking about people who you would call today black. All right. He's not talking about, because I know you're going to have people, oh, well, he's talking about like, olive skin, all that bullshit. Olive is either green or black. All right. So that term, even during the medieval time period, the term olive skin, when you said somebody was olive skin, you were talking about a so-called black person back then. All right. And I'm going to do a video later on about what it means to be green skinned or what that symbolizes. But that's not for this video. But once again, when Benjamin Franklin used the term swarthy or tawny and complexion, he was talking about actual people or so-called people of color, so-called black people. All right. It says, why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all blacks and tawnies of increasing the lovely white and red. So once again, the term black and tawny, he uses synchronously. He uses them as meaning that they are of the same people. All right. So once again, when he talks about the swarthies and the tawnies, he's talking about so-called black people. All right. That's what those words mean. See, what they do in the modern day time is they change the definitions of words so people get thrown off. So oftentimes, if you want to get an understanding of what the sentiment was back, 300-400 years ago, you have to read things in the context of what was written back then, because they changed the definitions of words to throw people off. Like, that's why you have people today, a lot of these little low-level white trash historical scholars who try to tell you that the word Moor is talking about a North African Berber, all this dumb shit. All right, but I'm going to cover all that in future videos. All right, but when you see the term tawny or swarthy or fuscus, F-U-S-C-U-S or F-U-S-C-O-U-S, that's talking about a so-called black man or a so-called black woman. All right. And notice he says of increasing the lovely white and red. All right. The so-called Caucasian, they know who they are in the scriptures, man. Not to go there. But the term white and red are synchronous when talking about the so-called Caucasian. Okay. They know who they are according to scripture. Their elite do. And once again, Benjamin Franklin was a Luciferian. He was a Satan worshiper, a guy who was running around molesting children and killing them and sacrificing them to Baal. All right, but that's neither here nor there. Allegedly. He said, but perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind. I agree. It is natural to be partial to your own. All right. But please, let's understand when he talks about complexion, he's talking about actual physical characteristics and what they call phenotype. All right. He's talking about actual skin color. When he talks about the tawnies, blacks, swarthies, he's talking about so-called black people. All right. All right. So now, once again, in order for you to get a proper understanding of what a word means, you have to get the etymology of the word. Now, we saw that Ben Franklin, he used the word tawny. Now, when we look up this word, it says tan-colored, late 14th century from the Anglo-French tawny, of or like the brownish or of tanned leather, from Old French tanné, dark brown, tan, dark brown, tan. That's why I said when somebody's called tawny, that goes from a Kobe Bryant complexion to a Steph Curry complexion. 12th century, modern French, tanné, past participle of tanner, to tan hides, from medieval Latin, tanare, see tan, related, tawniness. Once again, when somebody is called tawny or that word is used, it's talking about a man of dark brown to light brown complexion. This is why Benjamin Franklin made the statements that he made about the people of Europe. All right, now we're looking at swarthy. All right, swarthy, dark colored, especially of skin. All right, so now, now Benjamin Franklin, he called the Germans swarthy. Now, what Germans do you know today? When you think of Germans, don't you think of Caucasian people with blonde hair and blue eyes? Swarthy, dark-colored, especially of skin. 1580s, unexplained alteration of swarthy, from swart, related, swarthiness. Now, the next one, schwarz, also schwarzer, black person, somewhat derogatory. 1961, Yiddish. From schwarz, black, see, swarthy. Now, now for the people who try to gainsay and say, oh no, when he says swarthy, it's just talking about. Now, why is it that when it says black, it says see swarthy? Perhaps originally a code word to refer to black servants when they were within earshot, as German cognate schwarz appears to have been used mid-19th century. All right, so that's talking about the 1800s. Once again, the term swarthy means a so-called black person, right? This is why Benjamin Franklin said what he said. He said, we cannot get their complexion. They cannot get our complexion, right? Swarthy Germans. right? Africa, all black and tawny. Are you guys starting to understand how much the conventional historical educational system has lied to you? This is why I say when you go to these museums, it's all narrative. All right. It's not real. It's fake. So now let's look at swarthy. It says here to click on swart. Let's click on swart. Swart. Old English. Swart. Black. Dark. Of night. Clouds. Also figurative. Wicked. Infamous. From Proto-Germanic. Swarta. Source also of Old Frisian, Old Saxon, and Middle Dutch, swart. Dutch, zwart. Old Norse, zwart. Why is that? Because the Vikings were so-called black also. All right, I've said that numerous times. I'm going to be covering that in another video, historical video, relatively soon. All right. German, Schwarz. Gothic, Swartz. All those people were black, brothers. The Goths, the original Germans, the Old Norse, a.k.a. the Vikings, the Dutch, the Frisians, the Saxons. That's why it's called Old Saxon. All right. This is why I stated when Benjamin Franklin said that the Saxons were Caucasian, he's talking about how he's really referring to how they abducted the name Saxon to themselves. Gothic Swartz, dark colored, black. From the root, swardo, dirty, dark, black. Source of sordid. I don't believe that has a. I think they just threw that one in there. The true Germanic word, surviving in the continental languages, displaced in English by black. Of skin color of persons from late 14th century. No, it goes back way farther than that. All right. Swart goes all the way back to, from the time of the Germanic tribes, right? The Germanic tribes were the so-called blacks that invaded Europe and went to war against the Romans. The Roman Empire, by that time that they were going against the Germanic tribes, they were black also. All right. The latter part of the Roman Empire was ruled over by so-called blacks. But I'll be covering that later on. But once again, this is just to provide some context and to prove once again that when Benjamin Franklin was talking about the swarthy Germans or the Tawnies, the Swedes, the Italians, the French, so on, and the Russians, all those lands were originally inhabited by people of color, by so-called blacks. And when they were taken down in the 1700s, those people were killed off. They were mated out of existence, meaning what? They would kill the men and have sex with the women until they were bred out. All right. No, they were deported. They were killed off, deported, or mated out of existence. That's what happened to them. But once again, the term swarthy means so-called black, as does tawny. All right. Only difference is tawny means like from a dark brown to a light brown. All right. All right. So now this is just to provide some pictorial evidence to the statements that I've made about the so-called black presence in Europe, which Ben Franklin himself testified to, and also his statements about the swarthy Germans or the blacks and tawnies, particularly the tawnies of Europe or the swarthies of Europe. He was talking about the so-called black Europeans. This woman here that you're looking at, she was a princess from Denmark who became a duchess in the land known as Prussia. Prussia was a term, P-R-U-S-S-I-A. It's like Russia with a P in the front. It was an empire during the Middle Ages that comprised most of Germany and parts of Poland. All right, I mentioned something along those lines in a couple of videos in regards to, I think it was the one about the Lithuanian basketball coach who only wanted two blacks on his basketball team. I was saying that Lithuania and Poland, they formed a coalition to help fight against the black Prussian Empire. The Prussians were part of the Holy Roman Empire, and their symbol was the black eagle. All right. Sometimes they had one black eagle, or sometimes they had the double-faced black eagle, which represented the black ruling family of the Holy Roman Empire, of the black ruling families, plural. But anyway, this woman was a Danish princess, Danish meaning from Denmark, and she married a duke from Prussia named Albert. He was a member of a noble family known as the Hohenzollerns. All right, they were a black German ruling family. She died young, but as you can see, she's a so-called black woman, what you call today so-called light-skinned, or what Benjamin Franklin will call tawny. All right. But I think she died at about 40, 41, somewhere around there, 45 years old. But her husband was a so-called light-skinned black man named Prince Albert, who also was a what they call a Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights. It was a German knight order comprised of so-called black men. Like I said, the knights were black. All right. All right, now this is her husband right here. His name was Albert of Prussia. Like I said, he was the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights, meaning what? He would lead them into battle. As you can see, he favors, what's this guy's name? Lawrence Fishburne. If you remember Lawrence Fishburne from what's the flick he was in? Was it Deep Cover? Yeah. Like Lawrence Fishburne, one of his movies from the early 90s, he favors him a lot. Okay, but once again, he's a so-called tawny. Now, this guy, he's one of the guys who was partially responsible for the fall of black rulership during the Middle Ages. What was happening during that time period, you had the birth of what's known as humanism. And humanism is basically the philosophy that man can explain everything, can rationalize everything. And it really was a forerunner to what was known as the Enlightenment period, where man tried to use rationale to overcome God. To overcome the Most High, to overcome the spiritual aspect. All right. Enlightenment was the forerunner for philosophies like evolution. But basically what happened was that a lot of the black ruling families, because of a lot of disputes over the scriptures and over the clergy and with the Roman Catholic Church, a lot of the black ruling families, they started what was known as the Reformation, all right, in concert with people like Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a Caucasian, but a lot of the black ruling families, they teamed up with him because they felt like the Roman Catholic Church was engaging in a lot of wickedness, and it had too much power. Right, and it led to their downfall. I'll go into it more in depth in a later video. But the Reformation was a key historical event precipitated by humanism that led to the downfall of the so-called black rulership in Europe. All right. Now, this brother here, his name is not known, but he represents the House of Habsburg. The House of Habsburg was a ruling family during the Middle Ages, the Habsburg Empire. Once again, like I stated, you can see he bears the shield with the double black eagle on it. A lot of these statues are still found throughout Middle Europe, and you have to understand, even after the fall of the black rulership, where they would tear down statues and remodel them and rebuild them to look Caucasian, where where you went through the socialist revolutions of 1848, the bombings of World War I and II, and you still have a lot of these monuments that stand. So it tells you how many of these statues and paintings and things of that nature you must have had all throughout Europe prior to that. All right. So you see this brother, he has the large goblet in his hand. He has the earring in his ear. He got the afro. He got the rings. That's why I say, for the black man to shine is nothing new. That's just in our nature. It's in our spirit. Look like the brother need to zip his pants up, though. I see something peeking out there. That's kind of off. But anyway, like I said, you see the man. This man is a so-called black man. Like Ben Franklin was saying, this man is swarthy. All right, so-called black man. And once again, he's holding the shield for the Holy Roman Empire. That's why I said the so-called black man, you brothers got to get off of that slave narrative bullshit. Oh, we all just came in from Africa in chains. All that is bullshit. All right? Please stop. All right, this is outside of the Magdeburg Cathedral in Germany. When you see statues like this, oftentimes, whenever you see a picture of a black knight, they'll tell you that it was Saint Maurice. All right, that he was some type of patron saint that they used to pray to. No, they made hundreds and hundreds and thousands of different statues depicting different knights from the Holy Roman Empire and also from other parts of Europe. Once again, the so-called knights were black men. This is a statue from Europe. Okay. All right, this painting that you see here is of a German king. His name is Frederick I Barbarossa. I'm just showing you guys a few of these depictions just to prove my point. All right, and to bring relevance to my statements and also the testimony of Ben Franklin that the original Germans were so-called black people. Now, if you look up Frederick Barbarossa, they'll tell you that he was white and that he had a red beard. No, the so-called black man back then, a lot like today, was stylish. A lot of times they would dye their beard. Like I said, they would wear earrings. A lot of times they would wear one hoop earring. Like Shakespeare, he always wore one hoop earring. That's why to this day, whenever they make a film about Shakespeare, they'll have a white man with one hoop earring in his ear. All right. The Caucasian man did not wear earrings during the Middle Ages. That was us. All right. Shakespeare was a so-called black man, but that's another topic. I'm going to go further into that later on. I already did a video about that, but I'm going to do a couple of more videos probably on Shakespeare. But once again, this is a king named Frederick Barbarossa, meaning Frederick the Redbeard. And as you can see, he's a man of color, as is everybody in his retinue. You see the two black women to the left. You see somebody who's coming before him and bowing. According to the official record of this painting, it's an emissary from Venice, Italy. All right. As Benjamin Franklin said, the original people of Italy, the original ruling class of Italy, were so-called black people, or as he called them, tawnies or swarthies. All right. Once again, the term nobility of Europe, it meant, when they said nobility, they were talking about black people. All right. The so-called Caucasian was known as a serf or a Slav, meaning they didn't even have the right to own land. They had to rent land. All right. That's where you get the term landlord from. That's talking about the so-called black overlords. That's why, like I was saying earlier in the Michael Eric Dyson video, the name Murray, it means overlord. All right. Maury, right? A so-called black ruler. You were the overlord. You rented out your land to the Caucasian. You made him fight for you in order for him to have the right to live on your land. These are just facts. There's nothing racial about what I'm saying. These are facts. All right. And like I said, I make these videos for the so-called black man. I make them for these brothers so that they could understand a little bit greater about our real history. And to get off all that slavery narrative bullshit and all that nonsense about 400 years and 500 years of slavery, and stop. Please just stop. Because a lot of y'all that talk that shit, y'all really just want the white man to give you a hug. All right. So please don't come on my channel with all that slave narrative bullshit. The word slave, it actually was a word that was in reference to the so-called white man. That's why he's known as a Slav today. So-called Eastern Europeans, they're known as Slavs. Because they were in slavery under the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantine Empire was so-called black people. I'll be doing a video about that eventually. All right. All right. Now, this brother, this is Duke Friedrich, I believe the 8th or the 6th of Saxony. I think it's the 8th. Duke Friedrich the 8th of Saxony. I know y'all like my German accent. All right. Don't hate. But yeah, this is a coin. I believe that this is the American Museum of Natural History here in New York. All right. As you can see, it's from 1625. It's as clear as day, a so-called black man. You can see the man's afro. The man looked like Lionel Richie when he was in the Commodores. All right. It's from 1625. Once again, and he was a duke of the, I believe, of the Palatine. Okay. Oh, and by the way, you know who has ancestry from the Palatine also? Marlon Brando. If you ever look up Marlon Brando's dad looks like a very, very light-skinned black man. All right. But yes, this man was a duke from the Palatine in Germany in the 1600s. This was late in the Holy Roman Empire. This is around the time where they were engaging in something called the 30 Years' War, which basically was a so-called race war at the time. The 1600s was a time of a lot of upheaval in Europe. Okay, this is when so-called blacks were during the time of losing their rulership. You had a lot of different wars being fought during that time. You also had a war being fought up in the British Isles between the successors of King James and Oliver Cromwell and them. All right, but I'll probably be doing another video on that later on. All right, so now this brother's name is Johannes Morris, or John the Black, or he's also known as Giovanni Moro. He was a high official under the authority of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. He also acted as a high official under the Pope during that time period in the 13th century AD. This photo you could find in the book African Presence in Early Europe by Ivan von Sertima. All right, that's why I first saw it. This was years ago when I first saw this photo. Very powerful photo. And as you can see, he clearly was a so-called black man, high official under the authority of the Holy Roman Empire, which ruled all the way down into Italy during the mid-1200s AD. And as I said, he had a high office under the Pope as well at that time. I can't remember which Pope it was. All right, now this is the legendary emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, Charles V. All right, of the Habsburg Empire. We already saw one of the photos of a Habsburg noble. Remember the brother with the afro, and he was holding the shield with the double black eagle. Yes, this is Charles V. As you can see, he's a brother. And I'll be going further into him. I have a lot of photos of him when I do the video, or go more in depth into the video on so-called black rulership in Europe. He also was in authority over the Inca Empire. If you look at the Inca king list, you can see his photo on there as well. All right, as being a so-called black man. All right, but yeah, he was a contemporary of Henry VIII, who also was a so-called black man. If you ever watched the show The Tudors, they show you their interactions. They had a rivalry with each other. All those people were related, by the way. They would all intermarry. Why is that? Because they knew that they were all the same people. All right, not just being black, but being the holy people. Even though they were going to hell off. All right, they were off as hell, but they knew who they were. Problem is, they fell because of pride, and they were all fighting over inheritance rights and lands and things of that nature. All right, while the black nobility were fighting amongst each other, you had a group called the black bourgeoisie, who were upper middle class blacks who wanted to take down the black nobility because they knew that they would never be the so-called black nobility. So what they did was they empowered the serfs. All right. But that's a story for another day. But yes, this is King Charles V. First time I saw this photo was on the cover of a book that I bought about 10 years ago called the Black Presence in Renaissance Europe. All right. And of course, they didn't tell you all black Africans in Renaissance Europe. This photo was this painting was on the cover of that book. This painting was done by a Dutch painter named Jan Mostart. And of course, they don't tell you that it's Charles V. They tell you that this man is just a Moor, right? It's so funny. They show you this photo and they say this is just a photo of Christopher the Moor. But then they'll also tell you, well, the Moors wasn't black. The Moors were North Africa. So they have to lie on top of their lies. You understand? Once again, though, brothers, yes, we ruled in Europe, man, all over the place. This is just Germany. Why am I just sticking to Germany? Because this is what Benjamin Franklin was referencing mostly. If I was to show you all that, I'll be here all night. I can't do that right now. Okay, but these are the type of things that they don't teach in school. That's why I say the so-called education system is just narrative. When you go to the museums, those are just narratives. All right, when you go to the movies, that's narrative. It's what they call artistic license. The word license means permission. They give themselves permission to lie. All right. But anyway, that's going to wrap up this video. I'll be going much deeper into this topic. I have a lot of historical topics lined up. I've gotten messages from brothers asking me to add on to the historical series. I saw this segment on Benjamin Franklin. I had it on my DVR for a long time. I just haven't had time to sit down and do anything with it. But anyway, brothers, peace.